Hello you guys. So today I am going to be talking about vintage playsuits. So I'm Bella. If you're new to this channel, I talk about vintage stuff and I sew vintage stuff and I collect it. I'm using this headphone as a mic today, so I don't know if this is going to help the audio quality or if it doesn't, but I figure it was worth a try because this is the best I've got. Anyways, I kind of wanted to talk about playsuits today because I've been obsessed with them for a little while now, since the start of summer, and I just wanted to talk about them, give a brief history, and kind of the chronology to how they kind of developed, how they, like their inception, and how they developed throughout the years. And it's basically mostly going to cover from the 1930s to the 1950s, but I'll do a brief before period, and yeah. To give like a kind of definition of a playsuit, I'm defining it differently than how a vintage kind of view would, because there's a thin line between a playsuit and a swimsuit in these eras, so I might define it a bit differently than how back then they would have. And then after I give a history and a chronology, I will be showing you my collection and kind of just talking a bit about them. So, the playsuit kind of starts its origins with the Victorian era as bathing costumes. So, in the Victorian era, sportswear boomed in the 1890s as people became more active and women were allowed to have like hobbies outside the house that weren't, embroidery, sewing. And so with this, specialized outfits came for different sports that were popular during the era. So things like cycling, they have bloomers and like the cycling outfits, tennis, and swimming. So with that, the bathing costume was created. And the bathing costume originated in the 1850s, but only became popular into the 1890s. In the 1890s and into the Edwardian era, the bathing costumes consisted of a top or a blouse that was, loose enough to not show off any curves, because that was not really the vibe yet. Then they would have bloomers, so like they could be probably as short as like knee length down to the ankles, and then they would have a skirt over top to preserve the modesty. They would usually be in dark colors made of cotton or wool or any variable in between those two, and they are usually decorated with kind of like sailor motifs. So they would have like the sailor collars, or they would have white piping, and that's kind of how they like basically looked. Sometimes the bathing costumes were in one piece, so they would have like a jumpsuit kind of style, and that is what I think is the inception of the playsuit. Just because a playsuit is kind of a synonym for a romper, and I believe it to be, kind of the same vibe. So by the 1920s, fashions changed a lot. So, hemlines got shorter, the whole kind of silhouette got baggier, but this also changed in terms of sportswear as well. So the bathing suits of the 1920s are going to be completely different from what you were wearing in the 1910s. So in the 1920s, these would be wool one pieces. So it would be basically the same as your modern kind of one-piece bathing suit, except for a bit baggier throughout. Then it'd have shorts, depending on, personal length, and then kind of just like a basic like tank top kind of style top. And it wouldn't be, crazy. You could also have a skirt over the shorts, again, to protect the modesty. And, things kind of shifted in between styles. Definitely a lot of geometric kind of designs going into how the swimsuit was like knit. So it would have like Art Deco little designs, and that were just popular for the era. I don't think playsuits were really popular yet. Of course, things like beach pajamas were just starting to get into kind of general wear by the end of the decade, but it's still kind of relying just on wool one pieces. So in the 1930s is like really when the playsuit as like an idea, as like a whole category of like outfitting really comes into like play, and it becomes like a separate garment from the bathing costume. So this becomes like a separate idea because in the 1930s the idea of sunbathing and getting a tan and like getting healthily like color on you became like really big, because before that you want to be as pale as possible to like show that you were rich and that you didn't have to work outside. So in the 1930s is when this kind of switched. Playsuits were made to go over the swimsuits, but to be a little bit more modest, as to not show off your swimming costume when you were going into town or going on the beach and just hanging out. And also in the 1930s is when shorts became a lot more acceptable, shorts and pants to be worn, just for casual wear in the summer. So that's why playsuits also became more popular, because it wasn't so crazy to see a woman in shorts or pants during the summer. So the characteristics of a 1930s playsuit include wide shorts that were not really short or tight as you would kind of imagine in the 1940s and the 1950s with like the pinup style shorts. These were still very like tennis skirt almost like, but they're separated in the legs. So in the 1930s you will not see any shorts that are like super tight or super short. So that's kind of how you can identify a 1930s playsuit. And in the 1930s, of course, the playsuits are going to be a lot more hard to come by because they weren't exactly as popular as they would have been in the 40s and 50s. But they still were popular, I will say. They could have low backs or cutouts in the sides, as was very popular with the bathing suits of the era. So this is how you kind of like get a difference between the playsuit and the bathing suit. The playsuits in the 1930s were still made out of wool, and they had generally like baggier kind of styles. I have a 30s example that I will show you, and so it'd be low back and cutouts on the sides. And so the playsuits did mimic this, but they were in different fabrics than the bathing suits, because the playsuits would have been made out of cotton or rayon, which were both very popular. And those are like basically the two options that you're getting for playsuits throughout the 30s to the 50s. Also, an accompanying style or piece to the playsuit was the skirt. So in the 30s, you would have had a button-up skirt, or kind of a wrap, like a skirt you just wrap on to put over your playsuit to wear it other places that were not just the beach to sunbathe. The 30s were still kind of sunwear inspired, so you will see, but you won't see as many short sleeve kind of styles or button-up styles as you will in the 1940s, which is when they became more popular for like day wear. And going on to that, they were more casual wear in the 1940s than specifically beach wear in the 30s. So the main style in the 40s was still the one-piece romper, but they were oftentimes buttoned down or in the same style that a shirtwaist dress would be for the 40s. So you'd have a collar, short sleeves, and button down front. And so what is different with this is that they would be very loose in comparison to the styles that would be in the later part of the decade. So they would just be made out of rayon or cotton. They would not have an inner lining or inner structures as the tank top styles did, because you'll see, but they are going to be unlined and generally just kind of flowy, which is similar to the 30s. The 30s and the 40s are similar in the beginning of the decade with their casual wear styles, because they will be more like dresses than they will be like structured garments, if that makes sense. They also had different styles in the 40s that weren't as popular in the 30s. So you could get the overall style, where it was just like overalls, or you would call it like a pinafore style, because it'd be like a pinafore dress, but instead of dress, it would be shorts. And I think these are very cute, and I'm actually planning on sewing a style like this, hopefully soon. And that would be worn over a blouse and like open in the back. And less common and these one-piece playsuit styles are the two pieces. And this became very popular in the 40s, or not very popular in the 40s, but more popular in the 40s than they were in the 30s. So this would include a shorts and a top. It would include shorts and a top, usually matching, but not always. It didn't have to be matching. And since by the 40s, shorts were just, kind of common summer wear for younger people, because playsuits weren't worn by anyone over like the age of 25, I would guess, or 30. It's definitely something that's associated with being on the younger side, and I don't think it'd be socially acceptable at that time to be wearing a playsuit when you're over a certain age. Though there is an acceptability if you're on the beach, because that kind of just cancels out what you can wear at what age. So nothing's stopping you now, though. If you're older, wear your playsuit. Anyways, the two-piece styles, which I think are much cuter, they would include a bra top and shorts, and they could have a ton of different types of styles, but usually you see like a halter neck or just like a normal like bra top. And these also were in the 30s, like kind of like on the fringe, but in the 40s become a lot more popular. And these playsuits are not only being made by manufacturers, as I will talk about later, but they were also being made by home sewers, though I find it a lot less common to see a playsuit made by a home sewer rather than a big manufacturer, just because of the styles. So the two-piece playsuits and the more shirtwaist style playsuits, those I would say are being made by home sewers. The kind of swimwear, kind of sunbathing adjacent, that's made by companies. It's going to be made by mass manufacturers. Okay, in the 1950s, it basically became unanimous with, playsuits became unanimous with sunbathing in the summer and young people, and so it'd be kind of a lot more pin-up kind of inspired suits. The shorts became tighter and shorter, and straps became thinner, and you can have strapless styles, halter neck styles, and really in the 50s is when you see the boning and the kind of structured corset, kind of like almost structure to the playsuits show up. And as the decade went on, the silhouette became more streamlined and less about ruching and like extra details on it. And also a novelty sort of design that I see a lot in the playsuit styles are like bubble shorts, and those are in the 40s and 50s. Okay, now I will talk a little bit about the two main brands and manufacturers of the playsuits in the 40s and 50s. So these two come out of the West Coast, and I think are pretty unanimous names with vintage style. So Jansen and Catalina both emerged in the 1910s as sportswear brands. First, we're going to talk about Jansen. Jansen began as the Portland Knitting Company. They created the first modern swimsuit, and they kind of coined the name swimsuit, as before it was called a bathing costume. That was in 1913, and by 1918, they were kind of popular globally. Their motto was the suit that changed swimming. In the 1930s, they kind of shifted away from being a knitting like sweater and swimwear brand, and they kind of went into functional clothing, and their logo will be the diving girl, and there's a bunch of information online on how to date your Jansen tags, and yeah. Catalina is the other brand that I wanted to talk about, and I have a little bit more familiarity with this brand because I own a few pieces from Catalina. So they started in the 1910s as well as a knitting company, but this was out of California. They created wool swimsuits like Jansen around the same time, so in the 1920s-ish, and by 1930s they took advantage of Hollywood glamour and adopted the slogan, "Styled for the stars of Hollywood." In 1935, their swimsuits retailed for about $5 to $10, which is actually $87 to $175 today. And so I would assume that Jansen was going for the same price as well because they were similar competitors. And so I just thought that was kind of crazy that these were definitely not like cheap pieces. These were like luxury kind of swimsuits, playsuits. And so that's why you'll see the construction details that you do when I show you the examples. They sponsored the Miss America beauty pageant in the 1940s, and their logo is the flying fish. And then I just wanted to talk about another facet of the playsuit, which is two separate sides that I think kind of go off the same term, but are different from what I'm talking about. So the playsuit can also be referring to lingerie styles as a synonym for a teddy or a step-in, and the playsuit would have become popular in the 1910s and 20s when teddies and step-ins became popular kind of versions of combination lingerie. These, of course, are different in construction and use because they are highly decorative, made of silk and like very thin cotton, and meant for nightwear or under. And then also playsuits were really popular with burlesque and theater costumes, and these would have been really different in that they kind of toe the line between costume and leotard and playsuit, but you can still find them online. They're going to be made out of things like rayon, lame. They're going to be a little bit more risque in funner colors with ruffles and like rhinestones and gel sequins. And I think these are super cute, but they are a little bit harder to come by, so they're different. And it's not what the common woman would have wore, but it's just another fun facet of the playsuit that I think is really cool. So that's it for like my kind of history and chronology of the playsuit, and I hope that made sense and kind of helped you give an idea, or helped to give an idea of what the playsuit looked like and how it kind of developed. But now I will show you my own collection. Okay, here's my collection all laid out. I have ordered these in order from oldest to most modern. On the left here, we have my oldest piece, which is a 1930s wool swimsuit. And then on the right is a 1950s, or a late 1950s, playsuit. So I will be showing you the differences and kind of developments in each one of these. So first I want to show you this wool 1930s swimsuit. This piece is an example from the early 1930s, I am guessing, just because of the style. It is made out of a kind of itchy wool, and it has this texture, as you can see. It is also a bit moth-bitten, which I have yet to fix. It has a modesty skirt over the shorts made out of this less textured kind of wool. This is a piece that is made by a company, so it's manufactured. Let me find the tag. See, there is a tag right here. It does not give any really information about who made it. There's no information on this brand, but it is 100% wool. So you can see here that this is a kind of baggy take, but the reason you can tell this is a 1930s swimsuit is because of this low back. So in the 1920s, it would have been a lot more modest in the back, but the 1930s is always known for their open backs, and here you have a great example with these adjustable ties, and it's just fully open. This, I think, is the first iteration of the playsuit I have because it kind of goes way into the playsuit of the era, which would just be like a cotton version of this, basically. Next here, I have 3 different playsuits that are all made by one manufacturer, and it's a kind of chronological progression of the Catalina playsuit. So, to start here, we have a 1940s playsuit. As you can see, it has a Swiss waist kind of, and piping details and a sweetheart neckline. It is made, and also has the flying fish logo. It is generally baggier than the 1950s version, and You can kind of see this difference in silhouette right here. This is made out of a kind of drapey sort of rayon and is lined with a rayon jersey. And then here you have the 1953 Catalina Playsuit, which you can just see next to each other. This one has structure in here that the 1940s one does not. It has ruching down the center and is made out of like 100% cotton, as is the inner layer. Now, as you can see when you look inside these two, it is a bit different. So in here, you do not have any spandex kind of adjustability as you do in the ruching in this one. You have much less boning. The boning is only through these two bust supports. This is the inner lining. It's all one piece, as you can see. And here you have the tag, Catalina, and the little saying that I was talking about. And generally, it's a very much more loose kind of style. And then when you look in this 1953 Playsuit, there is no waist seam, as you have in this one. There's no waist seam. There is boning instead of in the bust right here. You have it in the sides right here. And in the right here, it's like really stiff. And here's the tag, so you can see the difference in the tags. And the lining is only in the bottom half. And you might be wondering now why I haven't included the later 1950s one. So, this one, as you can see, is way more streamlined than either of the two before. It does have a waist seam, but there is no extra ruching or really big shearing details right here. It's kind of just nonchalant. And it's a little bit more sporty in style. You can see how the shorts have gotten progressively tighter through the eras. And this is actually, I might have lied, it's actually not a 1950s. I mean, it's not actually a Catalina Playsuit. This is an Elizabeth Stewart Playsuit. So, in the 1950s, the Catalina, the man who created Catalina, had a daughter, and his daughter went on to create Elizabeth Stewart. So this is kind of an offshoot brand from Catalina, but it is from a woman who worked for Catalina for many years, so it's going to be the same style of construction. So as you can see here, this one has the most boning out of all of them. Boning, and boning in the bust. It has a half, again, lining, and the straps are not adjustable as they were all the way. So you can see here, no button, no button. And that is kind of the difference that you see through all these. You see how it becomes tighter, smaller, and more rigid, and more streamlined through the eras. Now here I have a homemade accompanying piece to a playsuit. So this is the playsuit skirt. The reason I can tell this is a playsuit skirt is because of these buttonholes at the top. In the 1940s, it was popular to have a row of buttons and a flap to go over it to attach your skirt to when you wanted to be more modest and go out. So this skirt has been cut short and the hem has been redone. But you can see this is made out of a drapey sort of rayon, and it would go over your playsuit. And yeah, that's just like kind of the little example I have. Okay, here's the final playsuit example I have that toes the line between a swimsuit and a playsuit. So the reason I think it toes the line is because these shorts are very short. And you will see the back, but the back is very open per se. I think it's adorable, and I argue that it's more of a playsuit, but I'll show you. So I think this is a late 1940s piece. It has these celluloid sort of decorative buttons and a halter neck. I love this. It has very short shorts. Oh, and an almost completely open back. So you can see here, the only boning is in this kind of chest part. No waist seam, but it does have the same sort of, it has a different sort of construction where there's a button right here underneath the zipper, and it is very elastic, heavy. So there's a lot of elastic used on this, which I'm surprised hasn't given out considering its age. And it's also made by Imperial, which is a different brand, obviously. And it's made out of this interesting kind of like rayon material that's very stretchy. And so I love this piece, but it's kind of, you can't really tell if it's a playsuit or if it's a swimsuit. But anyways, here it is. Okay, and because I was so inspired and so eager to get my hands on 2-piece playsuits, I sewed my own. This was a while ago before I actually owned an original vintage playsuit, and so these are not really historically accurate, but I will share them just for examples. So this is a 1950s style playsuit. It has a halter top and a little bit of straps. It is basically unlined except for the cups, and it does not have any boning or any structural support. Same thing with these shorts, unlined, but very cute. Here is a 1930s and 50s kind of inspired piece. You can see here it's kind of a longer top with the back almost fully covered because I added the sailor collar. It is a tie back. And then you have these shorts, which I definitely modeled after kind of 1930s style, which have the box pleats in the back, which were very popular for shorts in this era. I just thought I'd share these. They're both self-drafted, so no patterns available. Anyways, I kind of hope you found that interesting or helpful. I know the formatting isn't great, but I just kind of wanted to show you guys everything, and I hope that it still was entertaining. And yeah, I have never paid more than $50 for a playsuit, even though they go for a lot more online. And I wear them out just as rompers, and though most of those examples I showed you would be swimwear, even though they were cotton or kind of more involved than you would want a swimsuit to be today. I think they're the cutest thing, and I totally recommend you buy one. I think they're amazing. So thanks for watching.